suicide and depression are on the rise due to COVID. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I talk with one person who tackles mental health issues every day in her professional career, Judge Stephanie Ganaway-Pasley. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Judge Stephanie Ganaway-Pasley, welcome back to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. I am glad to be here.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you are a civil mediator. You sat on the bench as a summary court judge and obviously interpreted law for over a decade. You also have a BS in psychology and MA in counseling with a concentration in mental health and as a psychology doctoral candidate, PhD.
Correct.
Recently, you had an online discussion on mental health, particularly depression and suicide. What is your snapshot of mental health statuses among youth and obviously adults here in Charleston?
My snapshot is that I think that mental health is still very much a negative stigma to where people doesn't like to talk about it because of shame and afraid of being labeled. But however, talking about our mental health experience can be a challenge at times. However, we need to be honest with ourselves and talk about how we're feeling, what we're thinking, so that one can help you develop a better coping skill, stronger relationships, and a better sense of ourselves. And I even think it's important to have these discussions in the workplace. There should be advocates in the workplace to want to set aside time or at least have programs in place where people can talk about their stresses in life and anxiety and or issues that can cause depression. And I think it's important that we look at it as we look at our other health conditions that we might have, such as diabetes or issues with our heart, that when we put a professional team together, and that professional team could look like a psychologist and or a psychiatrist, a licensed professional counselor, as well as a medical doctor, so we can get back to ourselves to what we consider a norm again.
You talk about labels that people really don't want to be, obviously labeled as. What are those labels that are really common?
I think labels that are really common is that when people are diagnosed with an illness, or if people have anxiety and or depression, sometimes people are labeled as being crazy. People are not crazy. They simply have a mental health condition that where they might need to seek professional counseling and or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Mental health is the overall wellness of how one thinks, regulate your feelings and how one behaves. Sometimes people experience a significant disturbance in this mental functioning. So a mental disorder may be present when patterns or changes in thinking, feelings, or behaving causes stress or anxiety or disrupt a person's ability to function. And a mental health disorder, may affect how one maintains their personal or family relationship, function in social settings, perform at work or even in school, learn at a level expected for their age and or intelligence, how they participate in other important activities. And I think it also boils down to cultural norms and social expectations also play a role in defining mental health disorders. So when people are not themselves and they have mood swings, and we'll quickly say that person is bipolar, well, we really don't know whether that person is bipolar until they have been properly diagnosed. But when you notice a change in someone, it is not good to bring on, to call someone out of their names, if you may. It is better to sit down with that person and try to find out what's going on with them, because there are issues that come up in our lives that other people do not know about that can cause us some mental stress. So there is no standard measure across cultures to determine whether behavior is normal or when it becomes disruptive. So it's important that what might be normal in one society may be a cause for concern in another.
Now, Judge, let me ask you, what are the current cultural norms out here?
And I think that's what it boils down to. Each mental health condition has its own signs and symptoms, and that is determined by one's culture. If we see somebody walking down the street talking to his or herself, we might think that person has some issues or has some challenges. But I often tell, I'm a psych professor as well as a special ed teacher, and I often tell my students in my psych courses that my college students, that when you see people and they don't seem to be what we consider normal, one might not consider it normal to walk down the street talking, to appear to be talking to his or herself. We don't know whether that person is reciting a poem for a program they're getting ready to be on. We don't know whether that person is thinking about something that have been told to them. We don't know whether that person is actually singing a song. We don't know what's going on with that person. So we shouldn't label anyone. We should not label anyone. In general, professional help might be needed if somebody experienced, marked changes in their personality, eating or sleeping patterns. The family would know. Those who are close to that person would know if that person has an inability to cope with problems or daily activities. Feeling of disconnection or withdrawal from normal activities, unusual or some type of magical belief or magical thinking. When we're riding on the interstate or down say Rivers Avenue and someone cuts in front of us, we're saying, oh, that person is crazy. That person might not be crazy. That person might be on their way to address a concern that's going on at their house. You don't know whether or not that person is thinking about something that a doctor might have told him or her about their condition. We have to be sensitive to other people, and and I think it's important that we have to, unless you know the entire story or the whole story, that we should not be labeling people. We should be, we should be concerned. And especially during the times that we're going through now with COVID-19, there's a lot of excessive anxiety. Sometimes there's some prolonged sadness and depression or apathy, thoughts or statements about suicide or harming others. All of this is a part of a mental health pattern that one might be experiencing that's not a part of their norm. Substance misuse, extreme mood swings, excessive anger, hostility, or violent behavior. Because the COVID-19 pandemic has likely brought on many changes to how, we live our life, and especially now with the vaccination that's out, people are not certain whether or not they want to take it. There's altered daily routines, financial pressures, social isolation, increase in substance abuse. So you may worry about, getting sick if you take the vaccination, or if I don't take it, will I get sick? How long the pandemic is actually going to last? Whether you lose your job, you're going to get your job back, and what the future will bring, and information overload, rumors, misinformation. All of this can make your life feel out of control and make it unclear as to what to do. And sometimes, when people feel like they've been pushed in a corner and that there's no way out, sometimes people contemplate suicide. And I think that's important that families watch each other and look over each other, because during this COVID-19 pandemic, where one might experience stress and anxiety, fear, sadness, and loneliness, and mental health disorders, including anxiety and depression, it can worsen. So during a crisis such as this, dealing with the thought of, will I take the vaccination? Should I take the vaccination? Is the pandemic ever going to go away? When will it get better? When can we go back to church? When can we go back to a normal life, or going back to school? When can we go back on our job? It is common for everyone to experience increased levels of distress and anxiety, particularly as a result of social isolation, where you have to now maybe have Zoom family reunions and Zoom family meetings. So physicians and other frontline healthcare professionals are particularly vulnerable to negative mental health effects as they strive to balance the daily or the duty or their daily duty of caring for patients with concerns about their own well-being and that of their family and friends. Because a lot of times when we look at the frontline workers, we don't think about the fact that these people are working with people who have been diagnosed with COVID, so they put themselves at a higher risk.
And what exactly are those coping skills right now?
I think coping skills right now is that you find, first of all, you find a way to feel free to feel your feelings, in a sense. Maybe you and your friends or your colleagues are likely to feel immense pressure given the potential surge in care demand, so a risk of infection and equipment shortages, among other stressors. So experiencing stress and the feelings associated with it are by no means a sign of weakness or a reflection on the ability to do the job. I think intentionally employing coping skills, put into practice strategies that help work for you, that work for you in the past during times of stress. Sometimes people exercise. Sometimes a coping skill is just talking to someone about it. Sometimes it's meditation. Sometimes it's taking, deep breaths. So these can include, getting enough rest and finding respite time during the work or between shifts. Eating a decent meal, ideally healthy food on a schedule. Perhaps engaging in other physical activities such as jogging if you don't want to walk, or walking if you don't want to jog, lifting weights with appropriate social distancing, obviously at this time. And just kind of perform regular check-ins with yourself. Monitor yourself. Sometimes we don't monitor ourselves for symptoms of depression and stress disorder as prolonged sadness. We know ourselves better than anyone else. So if we have difficulty sleeping, intrusive memories, or feelings of hopelessness, these could be signs of mental health challenges, or anxiety and or depression. So talk to a trusted colleague or supervisor. Be open and seeking professional help if symptoms persist or worsen over time. And I also want to throw this in.
Sure.
I think we should take a break from the news and social media.
Okay.
Because when you make a regular habit of stepping away from your computer and smartphone, and from time to time, I think this is important. We need to look at the sources and make sure the information that's given to us is accurate information. As soon as we hear something, we just assume that it's the gospel and that is true. But a lot of information, even though it might be in the media, even though it might be publicized, it doesn't necessarily mean that the information is true. It doesn't mean that the information is accurate. So I think sometimes we need to step away from the media, the social media, and the news, and just take breaks and listen to reliable resources. You might say, well, what's a reliable resource? Then you have to figure out, if you're looking at different social medias and different news reports where people are not being, what I consider given accurate information. We need to find that source and make sure, go to CDC. CDC is going to, look at their website page. They're going to give you the accurate information. It's coming directly from them. But if you listen to a news station, they might give you part of it, they might give you none of it, or they might reword it all together. So when returning online, focus on information from reputable sources, not just sources in your social media feed. You don't have to take in everything that's produced by a 24/7 news cycle.
And what sources are you relying on right now?
I rely on CDC. When I want an update, I usually go to CDC and look at it because I figure that, in my opinion, that they're going to give the accurate information. I very seldom listen to I don't listen to social media, and I very seldom listen to, news channels. I just simply go to CDC. And there have been times where I've learned with information that's been given on CDC, reported on other news channels, not like it was reported on CDC, because people have put in their own interpretation, have their own assumptions, and interpret it the way they understand it, and the way they choose to put it out.
And what changes in prevalence of mental health issues and access to mental health care are you currently tracking?
When I look at mental health care, I look at being a professor. I have a lot of access to different books and other resources. So, and being a PhD candidate for my doctoral in psychology, which I hope to have finished by August of this year, 2021. I have access to a lot of different books, and I have access to the DSM-5, where I look at mental health disorders, where if there's any changes, it gives me an idea of how people are diagnosed, and what those feelings are and moods are, and what people experience. So it'll give me an appreciation of knowing that when somebody has a mental health diagnosis such as PTSD or autism, that these people are no different in getting treatments and getting back on track than anyone who's been diagnosed with having heart failure or hormonal imbalance. I always tell people that I know, if you have issues with your heart, you seek a cardiologist, the advice of a cardiologist. If you have issues with your bones, you seek out an orthopedic specialist. If you have issues with your hormones, you look at an endocrinologist. If you have issues with your feelings, if you have issues with your anxiety and your depression, it's okay to seek the advice of a psychiatrist, because sometimes our brain and neurotransmitters in our brains get lower. And if they get lower, it can cause us to have feelings of depression and or anxiety. And it's okay to seek a psychiatrist. They deal with a sick brain just like our cardiologists deal with a sick heart. And medication is okay to take if that's what it takes to get you back on track.
And what is the prevalence of mental illness among adults? Has that actually increased since COVID in your mind?
Oh, I think it has definitely increased since COVID. Yeah, oh yes, definitely, because it's the stresses in life that we look at. When we're looking at mental health, and we're talking about social isolation, we're talking about getting sick and possibly dying, and even knowing people in our family that have passed away since COVID-19, and because of COVID-19, that the anxiety level has increased. It's even increased for myself, knowing that I've known people who has had family members to pass away from this pandemic, because of this pandemic, because of COVID-19. So yeah, it does touch home. It does touch home, and it is stressful. But you have to but you have to find coping skills that will help you. And if I ever felt that I needed to see a licensed professional counselor, and I am a psych professor and about to get a PhD in psychology, I would go and seek the help of a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or a licensed professional counselor at the drop of a hat.
And let me ask you an obvious question here. What is the unmet need for mental health treatment among youth and obviously adults?
When you say unmet needs,
what are those needs they need right now?
I think the need that one needs right now, I think the biggest need is knowing that it's okay to seek help if you need it.
Okay.
And I think another need is understanding that mental health, even though it might carry a negative stigma, I think it's important for people to understand that when you go see a psychiatrist or a licensed professional counselor, it is confidential.
Right.
And I think it's also important to understand that it is about you. It is about getting yourself back to what you consider your norm is. It's about quality of life. It's about living. And I think that just like we would do whatever we needed to do to get our physical health back intact, that's a part of it as well, that it's okay for you to go see a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And I think the more we talk about it in our community, the more people will understand that it's not about being ashamed. It's not about the diagnosis. It's not about what your neighbor think. It's not about what your friends think or your family think. It's about you. It's about treatment. It's about getting the best quality of life that you can get while you're living. And it's about taking care of yourself.
Yes, ma'am. And let me ask you this. How many adults and youth actually have access, obviously for treatment, but do they have access to insurance?
Well, it depends on one's insurance. I wouldn't be able to answer that question, but that's a good point that you bring it up. I think it's important that when we looking at your insurance, and I would think that the insurance companies would, most insurances would cover mental health, though I don't know. Because mental health includes the emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So it affects, when something affects how you think, it can affect your overall health. So I think it would be good to look at your health insurance to determine whether or not it will cover any type of treatment. There are some programs in place with some businesses, even some churches, districts, where they have where pastors can go and get so many counseling sessions a year. Because of all the stress and pressure that takes place during COVID-19. I did a training for some pastors back early part of February, and that was one of the things that was mentioned to me, that I think this group of pastors were able to have at least 9 sessions of psychological treatment or mental health treatment, or to be with a licensed professional counselor if they felt additional stress on top of what they already do.
Let me ask you this too. How can people help their loved ones get on an involuntary treatment plan who may suffer with mental illness or substance abuse?
And that's all of that takes place through can begin in the probate court.
Okay.
As far as involuntary commitment, one would have to obviously petition the court and then bring that concern to the court and allow a judge to make a determination.
Yes, ma'am. And how should changes in national data when it comes to mental illness reflect the impact of local and state legislation and policies?
I think that our state, local legislation has to have they have to have their hand or their finger on the pulse, um, as they're looking at mental health and looking at different laws that can be passed. A very dear friend of mine who just got elected to the House of Representatives, I don't mind mentioning her name, Representative Murray,
Right.
Claudia Murray. She and I have had many conversations about mental health, and she understands that uh, when people understands mental health, it helps determine how we handle stress and relate to others and make choices. So mental health is important at every stage of life, and she knows that it's also important from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. And she indicated that she was definitely going to have her finger on the pulse, and that she was going to be looking at different ways that she can write laws and try to get it passed to where the community can be more aware of what goes on when one suffers with a mental health disorder. Over the course of our life, if we experience mental health problems, our thinking, our mood, our behavior, how it can all be effective. Many factors contribute to mental health problems. Again, and the factors are the biological factors, such as our genes and or our brain chemistry, the neurotransmitters in our brain. Also, life experiences such as trauma, and then there's family history of mental health problems. So all of this has to be taken into consideration. So it goes back to the question when you asked in regards to health insurance. Knowing that it can affect us it has a biological effect, it has a psychological effect, it has a social effect. These are factors that are considered and taken into place or taken into consideration. Should certainly have the ear of someone that is making the decision whether or not insurance is valuable to those who need to seek mental health counseling.
And what are those new factors besides COVID that you're hearing in your ears when it comes to mental health and obviously in mental illness?
Well, other than COVID, I think just daily, we all experience stress in our life, and that's very normal. If someone passes away, obviously we're going to be sad. Um, if someone becomes ill, obviously we're going to be, a close family member, we're going to be sad. If someone has been lied on or the street, we're obviously going to be sad about how people feel about us. So those are normal stressors in life. We all deal with that. But where it becomes a problem is when we can't get over it. When we're still mourning the death of someone, or we're still concerned about what somebody said years later, or we're still concerned about um, someone being ill. We just can't find any coping skills to get through it. And I always use myself as personally because my first husband passed away when our son was about 8 years old. And I had to make a decision at that point, am I going to fold or am I going to find, strategies to move through the process because death affects everyone differently. And I made a decision to move through the process. There are great opportunities to fold because there are times when you just, take a deep breath and you sit down and you look around and say, why me? But you have to ask yourself, why not you? There are many that had husbands and wives that passed on years before you, and there will be many that have husbands and wives who will pass on years after you. So it's not about that. It's about learning strategies to get through the process. So in getting through the process, it also builds your strength psychologically, physically, spiritually, and you find ways to get through it. You find ways to get above the low energy. You find ways above of feeling the numb. You find ways of how you can explain. You find ways of not feeling helpless. I'm going to go through it anyway. So my attitude is that you just keep pushing. You keep moving. When we're caught in a storm, a physical storm, we're told to put on fog lights and drive slow. And I think that's the way it is with life in general. You put on your fog lights and you drive slow. Don't ever pull to the side of the road. You drive slow and you'll get through it, because you will rise above anything that comes your way. But you have to be psychologically prepared for it, and you build yourself by doing that, by following some strategies that will help you stay strong psychologically.
And and this might be a redundant question, Judge, but what strategies have you developed thus far?
I developed the strategy of moving slow and keeping my fog lights on. And what does that mean? That means that you hear a lot of things, you might experience a lot of things, but if you know what's going on, you keep moving. Uh, People will say a lot of things. You will develop a lot of stressors in life. People will die in your life. I am concerned about my parents. I love my parents very much. They're 82, 88 years old, and I know that if life, if unless something out of the ordinary happens, they will pass away before me. And then I think about that today. And what I do, I start preparing myself. Things could change over the next 5 years. Things could be tragically different in my life. So in regards to my parents. So what I started doing, I spend as much time as possible with them. I make sure they know exactly how much I love them. These are strategies that I use. And I don't talk to them about how I feel, but they know in regards to thinking about things could change over the next 5 years with them. But I talk to them about how I feel in regards to telling them how much I love them and do as much as I can for them. And I've always done that. I just find myself doing it more now. And to me, that's a coping skill that I use. I take breaks from life where I just spend about 10 or 15 minutes just thinking about nothing except myself, just meditating. I sit down and I make sure I eat healthy meals. I sit on my back porch sometime and just listen to the birds, just breathe in some fresh air. Those are coping skills that I use. I exercise. I take time and exercise. And I find that to work very well for me. So no one knows you better than you. So, these are some strategies that you can use. Sometimes using a journal. I often tell people, write in a journal. It gives you an opportunity to see what you went through today versus what you went through today a year ago. And you'll look at the progress you have made, or you'll look at some things that you need to work on so that you can make better progress over the next few months. Eating and sleeping is eating well and getting enough sleep is very important.
And what's the percentage of youth in Charleston County that had severe major depression compared to like a year ago in your mind?
I think in my mind, because of COVID-19, it has put a lot of stress on a lot of people. I don't have any stats in front of me to say, the stress is down 50% more or a higher 50% more in regards to Charleston County per se. But I do know that stress levels, that the stress has increased since COVID-19 overall, generally speaking. I know that suicide rate has increased because, during the COVID, because people feel like there's just no other way out. And then that's on top of issues that people were already experiencing. Right. Mental health, illness, depression, anxiety, thoughts of suicide, all of this is very real. It is very real and it's very normal. And it is part of our responsibility to make, just as a people in general, that if someone wants to talk to us, that if we don't feel comfortable talking with that person, that we should at least try to help that person get in contact with someone who does.
And what are those coping skills for the LGBTQ youth and obviously other communities?
I think the coping skills is the same for every individual. I don't think you don't have to be in a particular class of people to cope differently. I think that just connecting with others, getting professional help, spiritually or someone professional in regards to a counselor, staying physically active, getting enough sleep. I think all of this applies to every individual that feels any type of stress, whether they're a member of a particular class of people or not. I think it's just dealing with people, the class of people in general. I think is what's important. Whether you LGBTQ, whether you're African American, whether you're Caucasian, Thinking of harming yourself is serious, and it's enough to bring attention to getting help. Inability to perform daily tasks like taking care of your children or getting to work or school on time. Doesn't matter what class you're in. What matters is that this person is a human being, and they're experiencing this, and it's worth to seek some help, to help that person get some help. Hearing voices or believing things that are not true. It doesn't matter what class you're in. What matters is that making sure that you're getting the help that you need, so you can get back to your quality of life, so that you can live again and be happy again and get back as close to the norm that you can. And sometimes it is a struggle. It is very challenging. But with the help of other people, professional guidance, professional medical guidance, and I am a Christian, so I'm going to say spiritual guidance. That works for me, and I think that's a good combination that people can use. And any other God that or spiritual being that people worship that they feel is good for them. I think that they should use that along with a professional team to help get back on track again.
And speaking of help, what resources and programs do you want to see implement when it comes to mental health in the next 5 to 10 years?
I would love to see programs to where people won't have to wait over a period of time, where they won't have to be housed in a jail until mental health counselors get there. I would love to see programs that are available 24/7, really, to be honest with you, to where somebody is caught yelling or fighting with family and friends, or experiencing severe mood swings that cause problems in relationships, or having persistent thoughts or memories that they can't get out of their head. That there's the facility that they can go to where somebody is available to be with them, but to talk with them or counsel with them 24/7. I would love to see a program like that in place.
Judge Stephanie Ganaway-Pasley, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you bringing me back on program and giving me the opportunity to talk about mental health. I think it's very important. Thank you so much.